This is a video to review both attached and detached garage alternatives for your house. I'm going to make this as rapid or quick as I can without digressing too much. At the end of, once everything was laid out, where your setback lines were, your front yard setback and your side yard setback, it looked to me like 13 feet, even though something wider might be better. 13 feet was about as wide as we're going to be sensibly able to go at that location. This one asks for a 5%, little 9 square foot encroachment into the setback. I can't imagine any board wouldn't approve that. So this would work. 24 by 13 houses your car, but not much else going on there, and not much else space for anything else. This stretches it out, leaving the back where it is and bringing the front forward. We begin to push the limits probably at 10%. I think there's a crapshoot of whether a board or commission or whatever would give you the whole 10%, particularly since you're picking up the extra 3 back there. But they might. Similarly, they might give you something like this. It's enough to do the job. If they didn't give you anything, this is the bare minimum, I think, to accomplish the objective, which was to house this car. But this doesn't situate the very best, obviously. But it's the smallest I think you could get away with, 13 by 21 or so. And as you see, you wouldn't need any permissions at all to build this here. But even that size, if you were going to shrink back to the bare minimum required to garage this car, and it was this, I would think any board would give you this as well. Have that same 13 by 21 structure slid forward and attached. The zoning administrator said a door may be required between these 2 spaces. I would think that we would, if that were an actual requirement, I think that we would apply for the variance from that as well. But that was mentioned, so I thought I would mention it to you. I don't know if they can have anything to do with requiring it inside your house, but they might be able to. And then just, as I said, I'm going to keep this short because I think it's now become moot. Now that we're considering you're considering the detached options. But this is the existing or representation of your existing building, and this is adding. This was adding a 14-foot wide, and I thought that was too wide for a number of reasons. And so this one then comes down to 13. It might even have this margin a little bit less than shown, but that's the 13 by 24 deep. This is the 13 by 27 foot deep. You can see it comes forward, and then going back to just 24 deep, 13 by 24. That is the 13 by 21 pushed back and looking ridiculous, but requiring no permissions. The same structure brought forward. This is actually the one I would recommend, since you're not going to really get any storage in there anyhow. Perhaps some is added to the back. It's 13 by 24. But I like this. I would think that getting that variance is worth having it look better here. These overhead shots are a little more confusing. But this, and I didn't do many of them. From the front, I did, the sensible 13 wide by 24 deep. Whether you extend that another 3 feet, you would be able to. That required a variance at this. They all required a variance of some type, except that one. That is that 13 wide by 21 deep, requiring no permissions. And you can see it looks ridiculous. That's that same 13 by 21 with a little bit of permission, which I can't imagine they wouldn't grant. And whether or not you stretch the back of that out would be up to you. But from the back, this is a few of them. This was the largest I thought you could reasonably get a variance for and accomplish on that location. And this is 13 wide by 27 deep. So it gave you that extra 5 or 6 feet at the front end of that car for storage in here. And this is that same, the front stays the same. Instead of 13 by 27, it's 13 by 24. And this was the ridiculous one that required no permissions, 13 by 21. And the same 13 by 21 slid forward to a more sensible location. So that is the review of attached garage alternatives, single car garage alternatives at that end of the property. Now, and next we'll cover the detached structures. Alright, for the detached structures, I've only put together 3 of these just to give you a feel for the whole thing. I mean, there are only going to be 3 or 4 alternatives, really. But this particular shot is zoomed way out so that you can see the distance to the rear line of the property marked here, 78 feet or so, and some of the other dimensions, as well as how I'm constructing the driveway given the location. Note that I've oriented it with its wall parallel to this side property line, which will make the most sense as opposed to rotating that to be parallel to the road, particularly with your existing other structures down here. These are your required setbacks, the 10 foot here, the front yard 50-foot setback here. This line is not important to your uses. That's your rear yard. You're not allowed to cover more than 30% of the rear yard with the structure, and you actually reach the 900-foot limit before you would cover more than 30% of your rear yard. So that was, and this was just the basic 24 by 24 garage, and we're going to go closer here. Now, for what it's worth, if you did want to add the maximum allowed by the township, it stretches out to here, and this is how your dimensions change. Then you end up with 24 wide by 37.5 deep, an extra 13 foot 5, and you have about 65 feet to the property line. That is if you would build the biggest building that you're allowed to build there. Now, so this is the first one, 201A, and this is the basic 24 wide, 24 deep, with a single 16-foot wide garage door. This is situated and sized. You don't need any special kind of framing requirements at these corners. If you widen this garage door out, which you could, to say 18 foot, that can be done, but you will have to do some special work on the framing here and here for wind requirements. Because you did indicate you wanted more space between these 2 cars, though, we've now just stretched that out to 26 wide, same 24 foot deep. In 201B, we've widened it to 26 foot wide, and well, you could put a single 18-foot garage door in here if you wanted to, and still not have to do any real special framing anywhere. This still allows you to not do any of the special framing anywhere and put 2 9-foot doors. And I think I might go in here a little closer, I don't know, a little bit closer, so that you can see these dimensions, what you have in a garage that's sized like that. Now granted, these cars are the Corvette, that is, some cars are, this is a 15-foot long car, some of the big SUVs are every bit of pushing 17 feet. So keep that in mind. And finally, leaving the width the same 26 foot, but just adding some space back here. Whether you go that whole space, it's easy enough to show you that or to do that, and you are allowed to do that on that location if that's what you'd like to do. But I'm just showing one more alternative here, and that just really is just stretching that out another 4 feet. And actually, in the interim, I went and checked on these car lengths. So I want you to see that. So we've extended this an additional 4 feet, but it's still showing the little short length Corvettes. And we put some real cars in here. This is like the length of a Suburban. It's a full-size pickup with a crew cab, and it's 19 feet long. And so you can see that additional space gets smaller, or should be, realistically looked at. I mean, unless smaller cars are going to be stored in there, the 28-foot version. The real cars kind of compress that extra space down pretty good, really. So for that reason, I've gone ahead and drawn or modeled the maximum building that you could get on there, keeping at that 26-foot length, because I think, or width, because I think that should be limited to the greatest extent possible because of this other structures here. So keeping that as narrow as I think is practical. And this is the full length. Now you're up at 884 square feet for a 26 by 34. So, but that should give you a pretty good feel for the alternatives. Oh, and I think actually now putting those large cars in here, large car and truck, now you still have 12'6" in front. So, but that is the maximum. I mean, there's another 16 feet. I guess you could go another 4 inches in length. That's the maximum about which you could build on that lot. Now, these are just some quick overviews. That's the small 24 by 24 single 16-foot wide garage door. This widens that out so we can put 2 9-foot garage doors without putting any kind of special framing here. Yeah, these can be reduced from 32 inches to as little as 16, but you do have to put special structure in here, which adds cost. And the next alternative shown was the 26 wide by 24 deep to allow for the 2 garage doors without special framing. This is C, 26 wide by 28 foot deep. You can watch its back end go back the additional 4 feet. And finally, on these overhead views is the maximum you can build there, which is that additional 6 feet beyond the 4 for 26 foot wide by 34. And I've made a few little short film spin-arounds of each of these alternatives, and those will just run after this. All right, some closing comments on this, on these various garages. First of all of them have been shown where the garage floor or the ceiling is going to be 9 foot. Here at the door, it's going to be 9 foot from the floor to the ceiling. At the back, it'll be 4 or 5 inches less than that. But you could bring that down technically as much as a whole foot if you wanted to reduce some of the impacts of these structures. Secondly, the comments on this one, if you want to add space, you could just stretch that out and leave this front. Remember, this one's the one that's only 24 foot wide. No special framing required because it has at least 32-inch margins here. On the two-car door, I would rather see these margins less and even skinny this up, but it does require some special framing. But you could take some space out here. These are all 2'8". This looks skinnier because of the casing, but you could squeeze out some more space, make it a little bit, and reduce its width somewhat. I think it's important to really limit that width to the extent possible. It may, if your contractor can't sight a pin on that, you might have to get a survey in order to keep it over as far as possible. And finally, well, this is that big one. This is the one that's 26 foot wide and 34 foot long. D. So if you go that 34 foot long route, I'd be tempted to endeavor to just narrow this up some. I couldn't draw everything, obviously, but these doors are 9s, and I don't know, maybe those go down to 8 foot apiece, and you could trim 2 feet off of this, whether you added it to the length or not. In any case, if you don't need the high ceilings, I'd recommend, from a cost perspective, it'll save some cost too, bringing this down 8 or 9 inches, whatever would make sense. So I hope this helps firm things up. Okay, I lied. I've returned here one more time. Mainly, I had started this out to just give you a rough idea of these garages, but I may as well complete the review. And as I was paging through those last photographs, I don't know if they're going to come right up, these ones here, and looking at this facade and remembering what your interior clearances were, and remembering that I'd kind of like to keep this back from this house to the greatest extent possible, I returned to this for further work and review, for your review. And this was D. This was that last one we just showed, right there. And so I just wanted to horse around with this a little bit, and re-reviewed the code, and I think it probably pays you, because you did say you were talking about 3 feet here and 3 feet here. In any event, in an endeavor to narrow this up some more so it has a little less mass from the street, I have reduced these margins, and there's a little bit of work. It's not the end of the world, though. It's just some special header work. Almost anybody that builds a garage is familiar with it. But you can see now this, skinning that down did make the square foot, if I don't lengthen it, made the square footage less. But now these clearances set up probably better for cars, and you'll have to make your own call on that, obviously. So that was one thing, skinning that up a little bit, and we'll page through these changes as well after this, after these few floor plans, just a few. Next then, we're going to stretch that back end out to pick up that 50 feet again. We stretch the building out like this. This begins to come pretty long along here, both sides really. So perhaps there's a window here. I think I had mentioned earlier there could be a garage door at this back end, a smaller one maybe, to get in and out of here with lawn equipment. It's a case of what you need to use the structure for. Finally, I had to back out in order to see this one. That's F, and here's G. trimming off some of the mass from here and pushing it to the rear of the property. Whether there's an opening here, that would be up to you. This wall doesn't have to be here. But so this is another way, and this is around 800 square feet. I was not going to stretch that out to the maximum, but the idea was just to push this back and get a little bit more yard out here in front. And maybe this kind of an arrangement works better for you. I don't know. But at least now you'll have that. And this is backed out so that you can see, its orientation with the whole property. So here then are the changes. This was starting with D, and first this was just lowering that roof. And there I just lowered it really about 3 or 4 inches according to pre-cut stud lengths, etc. Next is the skinnying down, the making more narrow of the facade by this. And I really think that's, if you don't need that wide space in the garage, I think that's a better alternative for the property. Next, I was adding that footage back on at the back end. Maybe there's a window to break that up a little bit on this side. And then this is that one. You can't see the back side, but I'll show you an overview to end this film of the little garage shed or lawn shed that was out behind here. Again, reducing some of that impact from the street. And this isn't perfectly according to what's happening on your street. You'll have a better idea of how that would how that sets up and etc. I think that's about it. Following this will be a little quick spin around of this structure here with a little shed, because that's such a different shape. And that'll be it. And good luck. Thanks.